right, guys, this is our second comprehensive technique video for Fishhound.com. Today we're over here on Kentucky Lake. We're going to be talking about bass that are coming in to spawn and rising water. They're the conditions that we found today, and we're going to do our best to figure out what to do to put them in the boat under those conditions. Come on, Brandon. All right. When the fish are coming in to spawn and they're starting to pair up and they're moving to the bank, one of my favorite ways to catch them is with a popper. Now, I'm not casting a popper out over open water or anything. I'm actually putting it right in next to the bushes and everything where them fish are setting up to spawn. So, I'm trying to make, good precision casts, let it set. We're not really popping a lot. We're walking it more. We're trying to get those fish to set it on top of their head and make them kind of very uncomfortable. Those fish want to be comfortable. They want to be up there paired up. They want to spawn. They want to do their thing. And our job is to make them uncomfortable. When people talk about bedded fish, everybody wants to, throw something on their bed or find their bed or sight fish or, those kind of things. There's a lot of ways to trick a fish that's spawning or getting ready to spawn rather than just go ahead and pitch a soft plastic in his bed. But when we got here, I guess we got on the water about 10 o'clock. First thing we noticed, the water temperature was about 67 degrees, 68 degrees. That tells me one thing, and it's April, 67 degrees in the south, the fish are gonna be spawning. We also found a lot of water. The lake had risen a couple feet. We've talked to some of the locals. I'm not from here, so this is kind of a blind trip, and actually never been on Kentucky Lake during the spawn in the past. So, this is all new. So we talked to a local or two at a dock or two, and they said the water's come up a couple feet in the last couple days. So along with the fish trying to spawn, now there's a whole lot of water on their head. This cove's got them in it, guys. We're gonna catch a good one here in a minute. But so one of the things that we eliminated real quick is we started fishing flooded bushes. You come to Kentucky Lake and you think, hey, I'm gonna go flip bushes and catch some great big old bass. Well, one of the things we found out was it's really, really fresh water in those bushes right now. So, the bushes that we were flipping, the water hadn't been in there for more than a day or two. So to no avail did we find, any fish to speak of. So we finally made a transition to the steeper banks in these shorter pockets. And we're trying to cover banks that maybe the water hasn't affected them as much. And so as soon as we got into some steeper pockets, we've started catching them. One of the keys to kind of what I call rolling a popper, fishing it close is the presentation. You got to remember, these fish are sitting here, they're wanting to spawn. So they're in shallow water. So anything you crash in there, you take your popper and you roll it in there and, it crashes in there and makes a splash, you'll probably end up getting a lot of followers instead of a lot of fish to commit. So what you want to do is you want to work on your cast and try to land it in there as soft as you can. It's one reason I use an old popper. I use an old P70, and the reason is because of the weight of it. I'm able to cast it a lot better than a 60 or a small popper. So I use a little bit bigger one, but it's not for the action. It's not for anything special. It's more for the castability of it, and I can kind of land it where I want to and get those big ones to react. I fish this bait from the time they start to come in the spawn until they're done garden fry and they start headed that back out on the ledges. And your targets constantly change throughout that period. So, one of the things we noticed today is anytime we've gotten away from the bank and we can't reach the actual physical bank, we haven't got any bites. And that's because those fish want to be against a hard edge to spawn. So, early on in the spawn, we're almost always pitching directly to the bank. We're trying to get it right up against. Today, like we said, we have a lot of extra water. So we have two more foot of water than was here, a day or two ago. So we're targeting banks that are a little bit steeper where those fish aren't as affected by the water over top of their head. So sorry, I saw a good bush over here. But as the season progresses and those fish spawn and they have fry, what happens is fry look for shade. You know, anytime there's bass fry, you're gonna find the bass fry in the shade. So as the season moves on and those fish spawn and then they start having fry, you're gonna start rolling a popper anywhere where there's shade. So the shady side of bushes are a great place, but what really comes into play in May when there's fry garters or docks. You know, the walkways of docks, anywhere where there's a walkway that goes up against the bank, that's a perfect place for the fry to get. You know, the fry are gonna stay out of the sun. Those big females are gonna be sitting underneath those fry balls ready to attack anything that threatens them, and our job is to threaten them with a popper. One of the other things I've noticed is we've had to get a little bit back in the coves. You know, we haven't been able to, you know, when we first come in, the first, 100, 200 yards of the pocket, I don't think we've had a bite yet. But as soon as we get around a couple docks, a lot of that has to do with protection. They want, when they're spawning, they want to be protected. So, if you've got some docks leading into a cove, each dock offers one more level of protection against that wind. So, they need sun and calm water to, help with their eggs. So every time you can put a barrier of insulation between the wind and the fish, you're more likely to find spawners. If you're getting ready for a derby, I don't ever have the hooks laid out. These fish approach this popper, they don't just come up and smash it and flash at it where you can't see how big they are. Most of the time you get a pretty good look at them. So, I like to, I'll have all my hooks rolled over. Now I don't take them off just because it doesn't give you the same weight and you don't really get used to casting it. And that's one of the things that practice is for, is getting your rhythm down and making sure you're dropping it where you need to. So, but I will roll my hooks through practice. And you'd be surprised how many will come up and eat it, shake them off, come back in the tournament, make the same cast, and they'll smoke it. When they get locked on this popper, it's funny, they get almost entranced by it. I've actually had them where I'll roll a popper into a little area and get one behind it, and he's kind of following it, and he'll actually change direction every time you pop it. I've actually had them run into the trolling motor before trying to eat it, because they just get so entranced by that popper above their head that nothing distracts them. I don't care what you're doing in the boat. In most circumstances, well, really in every circumstance that I can think of, once I roll my popper in there, I let it set. I let kind of the ripples clear. Because what's happened is you've rolled that bait and you've put it on top of their head, so they're already intrigued. You're not trying to cast past these fish and do all these things and work it like a topwater or a spook over a point or something. You're pinpoint cast already. So once it's on top of their head, I kind of let them freak out a little bit. If you throw it right on top of their head and you pull it out of there real quick, it just doesn't really stir anything within them. I try to make them crazy. So when that bait just kind of sets over top of their head, it kind of makes them crazy. And most of the time, the first time you pop it, they come up and eat it. My rod and reel setup, I'm absolutely just in love with for this popper. Anytime I'm in short casting, you can see kind of we're in the jungle right here. You don't want a real long rod. And anytime you got treble hooks, you don't want a real heavy action rod. So, the rod and reel setup I've got is a 6.3 Omen Black. And it's absolutely set up perfect for this. It rolls at just the right distance. It gets you enough distance to get your cast out there, but it's got plenty of rod bend to play the fish, when you got him on treble hooks. And the reel I like to roll a popper with is a 13 Fishing Concept E. I use it in a 7:3-to-1 ratio. I like a little bit faster reel. A lot of times where you roll it in there and you kind of twitch it once and you got slack in your line and that fish comes up and eats it. Well, you want to be able to catch up some line pretty quick. So I like a little bit quicker reel. I got plenty of rod bend, so the quick reel doesn't really put too much pressure on the fish. All right, guys, real quick, here's If you haven't seen someone roll over hooks, we talked about rolling them over for practice and going back in the same places and catching them in the tournament. Just take your pair of pliers and just turn it until it digs in. Roll to the next one. Every once in a while they'll break. Not most of the time on these mustads because they're super strong, but every once in a while you'll break one, don't worry about it. You know, the whole point is that you're not hooking these fish, but if you just roll all the tips in, go to the front hooks, roll that one in. Just make sure you get a good bite on your pliers. Roll that one in. Roll that one in. And there you go, guys. You got a weedless popar. Make sure you don't leave it on there for tournament day. All right, guys, that's it. That's all you need to know about rolling a popar around in the spring. We're here at Kentucky Lake. Stay tuned for our next comprehensive video on Fishhound.com.